Welcome, and how are you? In this tutorial, which is our second lecture, we shall be able to tackle elements of music part 1. Basically, this means that we are going to have two parts of elements of music. This being our first part, we shall do a thorough overview and basic definition of terms, such that by the time we finish the tutorial, you should be able now to call yourself a prospective musician. In the second part, we shall now dig deeper into very fine details of what we shall have discussed today, so that we can now be able to move from one step to another. So for today, it's going to be a good lecture. We shall be able to put a very good basis by the end of it. So let's begin by the specific objectives that we are to be able to get. But before that, let's bow down for a prayer. Father, Lord in heaven, we invite your presence in this particular session. You being the greatest musician you have ever known, we pray that you may be able to teach us music in this second lecture. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. First objective, by the end of this lecture, you should be able to, 1, state and explain the elements of music. So you should just be able to state all of them. And then basically cite various elements of music in different music pieces. So you should be able to state and explain what those elements mean, and also cite their examples. But now, to be able to define now clearly, because we are going to only to learn how to cite them out, but why in some case there are some things that we shall be able to explain them that way, please bear with me so that we're able to build up step by step. We shall just give every fine detail that is required of us in the next step in this lecture. Elements of music. Music has the following elements. 1, melody. Number 2, we have rhythm. 3, harmony. 4, pitch. 5, timbre. 6, form. 7, texture. There are 7 elements. Notice the 5th on that list is timbre. It's a French word, not timbre or timbre. It's timbre. Now, let's begin with the first one, rhythm. Notice the order. I've not followed that order. We are going to have rhythm, pitch, melody. I'm just going to distort that order, but that is what we are going to look. Now, rhythm. What do you think is rhythm? Now, are rhythms drums? No, rhythms are not drums. Rhythm defines the mode or the rate of playing an instrument. And an example of an instrument that is governed by rhythm still is what we term as the drum. Now, under rhythm, there are 2 types. One, we have a free rhythm, and necessarily under this, if you have something like a free rhythm, it simply means you can do whatever you want with that rhythm. Majorly, it's found in church music, especially in the Roman Catholic Church, whereby you'll find the monks singing the Gregorian chant. Kyrie eleison. So you find that they can do anything with that chant. They just it's a free rhythm. And the next is some rhythm has a regular beat. It's a regular beat, regular pulse. And as you have that regular pulse, it gets organized in either strong or weak beats. For example, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And with that, you can now define the time. For example, this one is duple time. Or you can have it more complex, whereby you have a triple time, whereby you have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like that. So all this brings us to the definition of rhythm. Now, what is basically rhythm? Rhythm is the duration of individual sounds and silences in relations to other sounds. Now, in grouping of beats, if you group those beats, for example, I just gave an example of dipole time and tuple time. We shall look at that when we shall be looking at something called time signature. So note it in your note somewhere, time signature, and just put an asterisk. We shall look at that in our upcoming lectures. So if you group those notes, it creates a pattern into a particular pattern. You'll have something called a meter. Each repetition of this pattern, which is the meter, is called a measure. Now each measure is separated by a bar line, and that bar line basically tells us where a particular measure ends, where a particular pattern ends. An example of a measure is here. Now one bar, if I have my if I just illustrate this, where you have one bar, it simply means it's inside the music. But a double bar line, if I just tell you beforehand, but we shall look at it in our next section, which is we shall be discussing about this stuff. A double bar line simply illustrates the final point of a music. It simply tells us this is the stopping point. Here the music has come to a close. So something we need to note is that rhythm is not drums. Rhythm simply defines the rate of playing. Now let's come to something here. Next element called pitch. Pitch. What do you think pitch might be? I believe you have heard from primary level or even elementary school that pitch is the highness or lowness of sound. Let us now be technical. Pitch is basically sound. Now sound is created by vibrations. You can have various instruments. I can, for example, have a piano. If I have a piano, notice this is a grand piano, and I have the picture here open with a grand piano with an open top point. So at this point we have strings, and at each key, when I depress a specific key, that key activates a hammer, and that hammer strikes the string, that specific string, and it vibrates, and that vibration now goes to your eardrum through waves. I believe you have studied through physics, you have known about waves, and sound is basically a mechanical wave whereby it requires a material medium to be able to traverse through, and it traverses in form of rarefactions and compressions. So it goes through it comes to your ear, and the moment those rarefactions and compression reaches your eardrum, notice the eardrum is a membrane, it vibrates at a particular frequency, and at that frequency it sends a regular pulse depending with how the frequency at which that eardrum records the rarefactions and compressions to the brain. When it reaches the brain, it now interprets that specific pulse as sound, or what basically we term as pitch. So you'll be able to hear that as a pitch. So if I just illustrate it more clearly about the piano, I believe now this one is more clear about the hammers. Notice if I depress a key here, it activates a hammer there. Or for example, it may not only be a stringed instrument, you may have a woodwind instrument. If you have that woodwind instrument, at the moment you blow, the air will be vibrating, and the moment it vibrates, it creates a sound in that instrument. Or it can be a brass instrument, the same thing, it's like woodwind instrument, but now here you have a brass instrument, the same thing. Or it can be a membranophone. A membranophone is simply instruments that have membranes, whereby you have to heat them to be able to produce sound. That is basically how it's being produced. Now, just something you can be able to note. The harder you play these instruments, or the harder you blow the instrument to produce sound, the more or the loud the sound is produced. And the softer they are played, or plucked, or even struck, the softer the sound produced. This defines to us what we term as pitch. So pitch is the highness or lowness of sound. Now, in the music system, there is something we can be able to note. Here I have a simple structure of a keyboard. So in the music system, let's explain what this structure simply means. Each pitch gets a letter name. So for example, I might have C. So the pitch of a particular sound has been defined as C. It was already defined and it's already in that particular manner. So there's a specific sound that C produces. Or you can have it as C sharp or D or D. Here we basically have sharps or flats. The black keys are sharps or flats, and the white keys of the keyboard or the piano are the normal notes. I can just call them normal or white key notes. Now, it basically picks the letter name of the alphabet. Now, the alphabet that we use is not A to Z. It's A to G, and it recurs like that. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now here I have a segment of a keyboard from the C to B. Why? I'm simply illustrating all the keys that I have from C to B. Notice I can say A, B, then I come back to C, D, E, F, G. A, B, so it's rotating. Now, if I just want to clearly help you out with this diagram so that you may be able to be well acquainted, I have the following diagram to be able to explain what these black keys, what do they mean? Are those B's and hashtags, or do they mean so? No. Here is a well explained detailed diagram to be able to give you a guidance of that. So please go through it, but I promise you that in the coming tutorials we shall be able to tackle this, and they shall just be at your fingertips. It shall just be a matter of a bubbling brook. It shall not have a problem. So something that we can also note beforehand is something known as interval. But in our practical session, we shall also look at an interval, what the definition of an interval is. Basically, an interval is the distance or the pitch between two notes, or basically the distance between two pitches. They can also say so. So basically, if I have from C, if I'm moving from C to this black note, which is C sharp or D flat, that's an interval. Or this is also another interval. The red intervals are what we term as semitones. Anything denoted by a red distance is what we term as a semitone. That, and that, and that, and that. Now, let me show you another one. We can also have a whole note. This is a whole note. That. A whole note. So basically, two semitones equals a whole note. Now, if you have something greater than that, you can have it as a lip. And basically, there's something called an octave. Octave is basically now the distance between two pitches that are named equally. For example, C to C, the lower C to upper C, is basically an octave. Or basically, if you calculate them the way I've just given you a structure, you will have 6.5 tones. That will basically give you the octave. Let's get into a practical session. So let's shift rooms. Now, let's get into something known as mathematical symbiosis. I believe from the biological point, the word symbiosis is not a very new term. What do you want to get under mathematical symbiosis? We have thus far covered what we term as pitch and rhythm. I would like now to spark up some thought in you so that we may work together. Now, if we mathematically combine pitch and rhythm, we shall come up with another musical element. Aha! Can you guess? Just give it a wild guess. What do you think shall come when I have rhythm plus pitch? Aha! Notice if I have rhythm plus pitch, I'll end up with melody. That will be the next element of music that we are now to study about. Melody. Now, melody is a series of pitches shaped in a more or less memorable fashion. Or, melody is the sequence of single notes that is musically satisfying. Or, melody can also simply be said as a tune. I believe that last one now makes you nod and be able to accept that now at least you know something. So basically the first two definitions are technical, and this other one is also technical, but it's less technical when compared to the first two that we have. So basically that's what we term as a melody. Now, I would like us to get a simple melody from the SDA hymnal, Jesus Loved Me This I Know. That's basic simple melody. That's a simple melody. Jesus loves me, this I know, from Seventh Adventist hymnal number 190. Now let us get into a practical class once again, so that we may see very good definitions of a melody that we may be able to grow and be able to understand clearly. Welcome back to the theory room. Now, in music, we have something called a scale. A scale is simply any graduated sequence of notes from a particular note, either upwards or downwards, by an interval of an octave. That's what we term as a scale. Now, notice I said something about key. Let's define what a key is, or a key signature. I like it in the form of a key signature. Key signature, it's a group of sharps or flats, or basically what we term as accidentals, written at the beginning of a piece of music to define the specific pitch. So something we also need to note, if you combine scale and key signature, the scale used to build the melody is called the key. That's also another way you can be able to define that. Now, I would like us now to get back to our practical room to be able to understand something about the key signature. Now, to ransack key signature, not in the form of what key signature do I have, but what does it play? What does it define? That's what I want us to get. Welcome back to the theory. I believe the tutor in the practical section is doing a good job. Wonderful job. Now, let's consider something about the scale. Now, considering the Western music, there are two types of scales. One, major scale. Two, minor scale. Now, these major scales and minor scales, they have a specific arrangement of tones. Let us consider the arrangement of these tones or semitones that we spoke about, that I believe the practical guy spoke about it in the practical section. Or if not, he's going to be able to do a good job afterwards, just before we end the tutorial. The first case, let's consider a scale or the key of C major that he has been using. It's in an order of T, T, S, T, 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 S. What does this T, T, G, and S means? The T's means tones. S means a semitone. Tone simply means a full tone. How can I speak of it? Believe you shall be able to look at this more widely with time. Let me just explain the arrangement of the tones and semitones in this case. So if I have in the scale of C to C, I'll basically have that particular arrangement: tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. And if you calculate that, an octave will give you a 6.5 tones. Next, let's get to the minor scale, but before that, you can also have the sulfur notes. Tone, 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 semitone, tone, 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 semitone. That's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Minor scale is slightly different. Here I'm considering A minor scale. A minor scale, it will be tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, 1.5 tones, then a semitone. The practical guy shall explain this much more in detail, which is simply la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, si, la. That's basically what we term as a harmonic minor. Don't worry about that. There are three types of minor scales. We have a natural minor, we have a harmonic minor, we have a melodic minor. They shall be explained in detail in the upcoming tutorial. Please note those things that you don't know somewhere in your notes, so that when it comes, you may be able to know what is basically going to be covered. Let's get back to the practical class. Welcome back. I believe the guy is really doing a good job. Something that I would like to dispel, that I thought it might bring some fear, is that we have basically sticked to C major scale, and when the minor has been introduced, we have introduced with C minor scale. It doesn't mean those are the only keys. Each note can be a key. A major, B major, B flat major, F major, E flat major. There are very many keys with their with different minor scales. We shall look at them in detail. So please hold your horses. Please hold your horses. Not those things that you think that are just disturbing your mind and you would like to know them, and then push them as questions if we shall not have done them in the tutorials that are upcoming. But we promise that we're going to do a good job. Next, we're going to do timbre. Timbre is the next element on the line. It's a French word, timbre. Now, timbre is the quality of sound distinguished by a singer or an instrument during production. Now, what do we simply mean? Each instrument has its own tone color. Each vibration is complex to one degree to another, because we spoke about that sound is produced by vibrations. So each vibration is complex to one degree to another, because if you notice, the piano, it deals with hammering the string. The guitar, you have to pluck the string. The violin, you have to bow the string. The piccolo, you have to blow air into the instrument. The brass, you have to blow air still inside, but in a particular way. So each instrument has its own tone color. Some are more complex to others. That degree of complexity determines the sound that the instrument has. For example, strings vibrate in a different complexity than human vocal cords. And human vocal cords vibrate more complex than an instrument. This is basically why only human vocal cords have the richest timbre. Woodwinds, for example, and brass instruments have a very thin timbre. This is basically because of timbre, we are able to tell the difference between various instruments of the orchestra. If an orchestra plays, you can be able to distinguish, this is a violin, this is a viola, this is a cello, this is a double bass, this is a piccolo, this is a name them. This is a French horn, this is a clarinet. There are very many. You can be able to distinguish each one of them because of the tone color. So let us now head for a very weighted break that we have so yearned for. Can take just a quick break. Breathe in and out, in and out. I'm very good, very fresh. You can breathe in again. Now we can take something here, just something off class, but just have your books ready, because we shall jump into class right away in a very short while. Now we have looked at melody thus far. We need to progress to something else that builds up on melody, and that's harmony. Why do we pick on harmony? Now, before that, let's get a quotation from a renowned classical composer, Franz Joseph Haydn, on his perspective towards harmony, and why we are picking harmony immediately after melody, not the reverse. That's Franz Joseph Haydn. He said, melody is the main thing. Sorry for that misspell. Melody is the main thing. Harmony is only to charm the ear. What did I say? Harmony is useful to charm the ear. So basically, the harmony part of a song basically is used to charm the ear, just to brighten the color. So why do we say so? Why do you say it's something to charm the ear? Let's get a reason. This is because the perception of depth, perspective, mood, color, and atmosphere is joined to melody through harmony. In a well-balanced written piece of music, the harmony will be supportive of the melody and play a subservient, though crucial, role. That's something we need to note. So after getting that background, let's skip on looking for the gems. Now let's get back to class. Harmony. Harmony, this is the simultaneous sounding of two or more notes simultaneously. So if you have simultaneous sounding of two or more notes, that is harmony. And we shall be able to define what that specifically means in the practical session. Or we can also say it's the sounding of two or more notes simultaneously. Let's get a harmony with this particular song, the SDA hymnal, still Jesus Loves Me, This I Know, song number 190. So here we are going to add the second note to that melody. That's basically, you can call it the alto line and the soprano line. That's harmony. Now let's now make it more bright, and let's make the ear, what we hear in the ear, more beautiful to what we have. Let's take a look. Wow, it was really beautiful, really awesome. Now let's get to class so that we're able to hear much more of what we have here. Let's get to the practical class. Welcome back to class. I believe those are what you covered in your practical class. Now let's just define something that he ended with, discord or dissonant. Discord simply refers to the state of disharmony between notes or chords, or the feeling of disharmony experienced by the listener, usually by notes separated by irregular intervals. So when we learn about intervals and how the regular form of intervals, if you go against those intervals, the regular intervals shall have a discord. Now, after understanding harmony, let's add texture. Now, question. What do you suppose texture to be? What do you think texture is? I've gotten an answer. Texture is the feel, appearance, or consistency of a substance or a surface, either rough surface or either smooth surface. That's correct. That is what we have as texture. Now, something else we can be able to question ourselves. But what surface does music have? If we speak of smooth and rough surfaces, please help me in that quagmire. I'm gonna answer your question, don't worry. Music has a surface, only that it's not really defined in terms of roughness or smoothness or whatever it is. There are good ways of able to define the texture of a particular music. Now, the music surface is the level of music notes heard. So, how many notes do you hear? Or what is the level of the music notes you hear? Or basically, the notes on a musical score. That's what we mean by a musical score, the diagram that we have there. Just a portion of a musical score. So notice here we have various instruments harmonized in various ways. So some of them have individual melodies. Look at these melodies moving along alone. This one is singing a different melody at a particular point. Here we have a different melody. So those are the particular notes that you can be able to hear. Are they individual melodies or are they attached to each other such that they sound at the same time? Shall we be able to define that with time? So this brings us to the definition of texture. What is texture? It's the number of individual musical lines or simply melodies and the relationship these lines have to one another. So basically, we check the number of melodies. And in this case, if you have one melody, it shall be one melody that you shall be able to hear. Now we need to train our ear from this point. This is where musicians are known. So the number of melodies you hear is what we term as texture. So this doesn't refer to the number of musical performance producing musical lines. You may find that we have 20 violinists playing the same line. Doesn't mean that that is texture. That is simply one melody being played. Or you might have one musician or two musicians playing different lines. That will be a different texture. That is it. So it doesn't refer to the number of performance producing musical lines. It simply is focused to the music composition itself. The texture of music can be defined in the following three ways. 1. Monophonic, homophonic, and polyphonic. Now, these are very funny terms that you can be able to see. They are Greek terms, but we shall be able to explain what they are. Now, note, there's another texture called heterophonic texture. Now, it's not common in Western music, so we shall not be able to cite good examples in Western music. So it's mainly found in native traditional music, jazz, in Dixieland and Chicago varieties. That's where basically they are found. So we shall focus on the three, that is monophonic, homophonic, and polyphonic, that we shall meet in this course and interact with in this career. Those are the three basic ones that you need to know. But with the time, we shall also look at a heterophonic texture, such that you may also be acquainted with it, so that you may appreciate also variety. Now let's get something else. Take note. Each texture has two parts. The name texture, the way to define the texture. That's what I'm looking at now. Each texture has two parts, the root word and a suffix. The suffix is in all of them. It's common to all of them. The phonic part, phonic, monophonic, polyphonic, homophonic, phonic part. So we shall begin by giving the meaning or defining what is phonic. Now, phonic. What is phonic? It comes from a Greek word phone, and we have added to it an English suffix, ik, I see. Phone is with the equivalent of an English word, voice. So it simply means, from the early 19th century, from the Greek word phone, it simply means voice, and then you add the suffix ic, so it becomes phonic. Phonic is simply voice. Now, if you have the voice part of it, now let's get down to the other terms. Monophonic texture is the first one on the line. So in this case, what is monos? What is mono? Because mono and phonic are two different Greek words. Mono comes from the word monos, from a Greek word, that is alone, alone, or basically one, alone, one. It's the only one. Notice in the Bible it says the Father's only Son, referring to Christ. He's the only one, or this is the only pen I have. It's one. So basically it means one, but we have the phonic part. Phonic, what is phonic? Voice. So it means a voice alone, or one voice. That's basically what it come about to. And that brings us to the definition of monophonic texture, which is it's a single melodic line weaving along without supporting harmony and accompaniment. Let's get an example of monophonic texture. This is basically a song called Auld Lang Syne, and it's basically monophonic texture. So it's simply one melodic line weaving along without supporting harmony or accompaniment. So basically that's monophonic texture. And notice there's something called read here. This read simply tells us it's ritardando. Ritardando, we shall also look at it in this tutorial, what it basically means. Don't worry. Next texture is a homophonic texture. It's two words still, homo and phonic. What is homo? It comes from the term homos, which basically means same. So from that Greek word homos, we have same, but phonic is voice. The two words combined, homos, phonic, we come up to say we have the same voice. But what do we mean by same voice? We shall look at the example so that we appreciate what we mean by same voice. The definition is therefore, it's a single melodic line that supports harmony. So it means there's a single melody that is being harmonized. Let's get an example. Before I play this, I want you to notice this as it will be playing, that the melody is the top line that is being played by the piano, the black notes on this first staff. Let me just name it for you. This is where we have the melody, the black notes. Or you can also follow the piccolo. It's basically the melody. You can notice that it's similar to those black notes on the first line of that piano. I'll call them line for this case, but with the time we shall find its technical name. Also this one, that's what we have as the melody. Now notice as it will be playing along, it has each note below it and they are playing along. So these other ones are accompaniments. They are basically supporting that melody. That's why I was saying homophonic texture is simply a single melodic line weaving along, supporting harmony or accompaniment, or both. So in this case, we have the accompaniment part, the last three notes below it, these ones, they are basically supporting the melody. Take a listen. So basically, you have had one melody of this song. This song is basically Joyful Joyful, and it's from the SDA hymnal song number 12. So that's what we have as homophonic texture. There's one melody that's had against an accompaniment of the harmony. Let's get the last texture that we're going to look at, polyphonic texture. Let's get what polyphonic texture is. It comes from the Greek words polus, or basically poloi. Polus, a Greek word, its equivalent is much in English. And the equivalent of the Greek word poloi is many. So if you combine the two, I'll come and say polus phonic, which is much voice, or polyphonic is many voice. So it means there are very many melodies that are heard. It's either two or more melodies that are being heard. In homophonic, we had only had one melody. Homophonic and monophonic, they have one melody. The only difference is the accompaniment and the harmony. But in this case, you have very many melodies, two or more. So polyphonic texture, these are multiple melodic voices which are to a considerable extent independent from or in imitation with one another. Let's get an example of this. This is basically the song The Lord Gave the Word by George Frederick Handel as a part of the famous oratorio called The Messiah. I want you to notice the soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, plus the piano. They shall be playing different melodies at different instances, and each of that is what we term as a melody. It's an independent melody on its own, though it gives a harmonic effect, but they are not playing at the same time. Notice if it's a harmony, it has to be a chord played at the same time. But because they are independent and they meet at the end, is what we term as polyphonic texture. There are very many melodies together. Have a look. Now, it might have been quite a difficult task being able to identify the difference between monophonic, polyphonic, and homophonic textures. Please repeat the video once again so that you're able to acquaint yourself with what I simply mean as the basis. If you get this basic knowledge and have a rough idea of what you should expect in the texture point, when we come to part 2 of elements of music, when we shall ransack these textures one on one to be able to understand what they mean, it shall be easy for us to be able to appreciate it. Now, just as an additional knowledge, there's a thing here that is named TR. It's what we call a trill. That's what you had as it's one note, but it plays twice. We shall be able to define it later. I'm just giving a simple way to be able to understand it. Let's get a pause. Before we tackle the last element, we shall tackle two basic components of any song. Two of them. One, tempo. Two, dynamics. These two, they determine the performance of the music, namely tempo and dynamics. Let's get tempo. Tempo is basically the speed of any piece of music. In music, we use Italian words to indicate tempo. The most common tempo markings ranging from slowest to fastest include 1, we shall name all of them here. They are just but samples. 1, largo, which is basically large or slow. Andante, walking tempo. Moderato, which is moderate. allegro, fast or cheerful, vivace, lively, presto, very fast, accelerando, which is speed up, ritardando, which is slow down, and then finally we shall have rubato, which is speed up and slowing down. It speeds up and slows down. Now, there are symbols in music. They are basically, they shall be written the way they are. So it shall not be very difficult for you to be able to identify them. Now, caution, these are just but a few, a summary and the basic terminologies that you shall be able to meet oftenly. More, you shall meet them in the music field. Please read widely. I'm giving you basics. Dynamics. Dynamics is the loudness or softness of any piece of music. The most common dynamic markings ranging from loud to soft are piano, which is also another Italian word, which means soft. That is the symbol in music. Forte, which is loud. Its symbol is F. That F-like thing. Now, we have crescendo, which gets louder. This is the symbol. So it basically gets loud. That's basically what it simply means. Decrescendo or diminuendo gets softer. It gets softer. That is what it simply means. On these two, suffixes or prefixes are added to bring different meanings. So there are two types of suffixes that we're going to look at that are added to this, not only to the dynamics part, or they can also be added to the tempo part, the tempo markings, depending with the meaning the composer intends to give. Let's get what they are. The suffix part. Issimo. It means very, very, very. Let's add them to the terminology that we have in dynamics. Examples. Pianissimo. It simply means, can you guess? Write it down. I'll come to check your work just in a moment, then just very short. Next, fortissimo. That is its symbol. Now let's get the prefix part. We shall use mezzo, which means moderate or medium, somewhere in the middle. That's what it means. Examples. Mezzopiano. Its symbol is MP, that MP thing. Next we have mezzoforte. It's written like that. Now, what do you think they mean? Could you try to give yourself a thought so that you're able to have yourself a wild guess of what they specifically mean? Did you have that? Pianissimo is simply very soft. Fortissimo is very loud. Moderately soft is mezzopiano. Mezzoforte is moderately loud. Now note, the two suffixes and prefixes mezzo and issimo are also used widely in music depending with the meaning intended. So you can have mezzo-largo, or you can have larghissimo, depending on what you want. So these are also not all dynamics, but the basic ones. More shall be found in the music field. Let's get the last point, which is form. I believe from the term form, what might it mean? Form is structure of something. How does something look like? Its form. How was it created? How artistically is it? So similar to melody, which begins with the tonic, moves away from the tonic through a series of variations, we, the audience, feel as if we have been in a sort of journey. as soon as the music reaches back to the tonic, we shall have arrived from a musical journey. Let's try to explain this out. In this musical journey, there are a number of features we shall have seen. Similarly to a physical journey, we shall have seen the different topography of the land, animals, and so on. So this is what we mean. You come into a vehicle, ignite your car, and you drive off. You shall be able to see various features: mountains, river, lakes, hills, ravine, ocean, forest, volcanic mountain. We also have mountains, you have deserts, you have oceans, you have icebergs. Name them, there are very many. Similarly, this happens to music too. There are different musical features we shall have seen through our musical journey. The question to be answered is, what are the musical features that are expected to be seen in a musical journey? This shall be tackled later in the course. So that question, don't worry about it. It shall be tackled later in the course. Now, this basically tells us we shall be dealing with music analysis in this section. So be prepared. Train your ear. It calls us to develop all our 5 senses to be musically sensitive towards analyzing music. Otherwise, this brings us to the definition of form. It's the structure, style, and composition of a song or a composition. So in a nutshell, what have we basically looked at? Music has 7 elements. Next, they are the following: 1. Melody, 2. Rhythm, 3. Harmony, 4. Pitch, 5. Timbre, 6. Form, 7. Texture. Those are the 8 elements or fundamental elements that you have looked at, and you've also cited various examples of each of them so that you may be able to understand them basically. But with time, we shall be able to split them up and be able to make you understand what they are. It was a wonderful lesson. Catch you to the next tutorial as we dig deep into this music course. Now, we shall study in the next lesson stuff. Stay tuned.